Hey guys, welcome to Three Deep South. This is a college football podcast brought to you from the great state of Arkansas. Today we got Cody and Justin with us. Derek is unfortunately busy with some family stuff. He's planning a trip and all this, so he's going to be without us today. But going forward, it'll be four of us instead of three. Today we're going to talk about the Big Ten, but first we're going to get into the news of reported expansion again and what that might mean going forward for college football and maybe some repercussions that you're not thinking about outside of getting to watch more football. So, Cody, if you would like to start with maybe like your thoughts, 14 to 16, all the automatic bids, all that stuff, just kind of what you think about it a little bit.
You know, I'm for expanding the playoffs a little bit. I was reading an article about it today, and what it looks like to me is that I would have thought 16, but from what I researched, they're thinking about going from 12 to 14. Well, I'm like, why? Well, it turns out that reportedly ESPN has offered the college football playoffs over $1 billion to expand it a little bit, and their existing deal ends this year in 2025. So we're looking at probably the expansion happening in 26. Um, and like I said, it's been reported that all fingers are pointing at a 14 team playoff. So I think they're going to still go with the five highest ranked conference champions, with the four highest ranked getting the buys, and then the next seven ranked at large. That's for the 12-team format coming up this year. I'm I'm honestly not sure how it's going to look because I was thinking about that. With these expansions, how are we going to seed and who's going to get the buys?
And from what I kind of understand is the SEC and Big Ten want more automatic bids for their top three or four. From what I read, I read 16, and it kind of made more sense. 14, I don't know exactly how they would format that. I'm sure that there would be more clarification on that whenever the time came. Justin, what do you maybe think about how a team will structure the end of their season going into a conference championship week where it might not benefit them to play in a big game like that where they got a lot on the line as far as playoff seeding, but two with just general health?
Yeah, man. It's one of those things to where I think it's just going to depend season to season, and it's going to depend on the team. Like we were talking about earlier, like an SMU or a Arizona State or somebody that doesn't have that blue blood, the history of like an Ohio State or a Georgia or an Alabama, they're not going to be able to do that as much as like a big team. Like if Ohio State or Alabama plays, I don't think it's going to particularly do anything for the rivalry week because there's just too much history that goes into that. I mean, there's towns that hate other states and states that hate other states just because of the college football that goes on there. But like your weeks before that, if you're 8-0 leading into week 9 and you have, a player on your team that you can't risk losing, but you're going to make a pretty good playoff run, why would you play them? I mean, I know college football is totally different than the NFL, but at the end of the day, like how far away is college football from the NFL now? With transfer portal, that's like free agency. You have NIL where I think NIL is worse than NFL because you just have like kids are jumping in between spring and fall and asking for money. And, there's a kid that plays for Miami now that was dead set on going to Ohio State, but he flipped because they offered him more money. So I think it's really going to depend on the season and it's going to depend on the team. I mean, I don't want it to happen. I'm for the 16 or 14 team playoff, whatever they decide, because, I mean, at the end of the day, we all just want college football to last longer. Being an Ohio State fan, I mean, football didn't end until, almost the end of January. And then you have, a month, and then you have spring ball. So, I'm all for extending the season, but I think it's going to take the traditional values of college football, how every single game matters, and I just worry that it might not be the same.
Mm-hmm. And what I kind of worry about with that is let's say you are last year, for example, you're number 2 in the conference, Penn State. And if you have an automatic bid already locked up because you're number 2 going into the conference championship week, why do you care what happens in that game? If you're already the number 2 seed, you already have a bye or a home playoff game. Why are you going to play Drew Aller? I mean, why would you? Why would you play Nick Singleton? Why would you play Katron Allen? Why would you play those guys? Why would you subject your linebackers and your defensive linemen to abuse in a game that essentially is played for nothing? What I think would be, I listened to Josh Pate a lot. What he talked about was, if let's say it was in his situation, he was talking about 16 teams and it would be the 3 and the 4 seed, is instead of having the 1 and 2 play, have the 3 play the 6 and the 4 play the 5 and have them play for playoff spots, essentially. I like that a lot better because then whenever 3 seed Alabama is in, I don't know where they would play, probably hopefully Atlanta is what I would hope, but they're playing in Atlanta and they got to play Ole Miss or South Carolina or LSU. Now that game means something. Now you're playing for a playoff spot, and it makes conference standings and conference where you end. It makes games matter again, and in a spot where last year Tennessee lost to Arkansas week 4, and how did it affect their season?
It didn't really. I mean, theoretically, like, it didn't.
So that's kind of what I hope. I hope they gear this thing for just games to matter more. My favorite iteration of college football was the BCS, where every game mattered. I mean, it didn't matter who you were playing; every game mattered. So I hope we can kind of get back to that.
I liked it, the BCS, but I mean, I didn't because it seemed like it seemed like towards the end of the BCS, like, obviously you had the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl and all that, and like teams cared about that, but like once you got up to that upper echelon of college football, like, I just didn't like it because after you lost one game, like, a lot of teams thought their season was over.
Right.
Now, it made every single week interesting, but it just I like the 4-team playoff, and I don't have an issue with the 12. It's just, I think if we go much more than 12, I just think we could get into that where games matter, but they just don't matter like they used to.
Right.
Like,
Well,
you're not
Cody,
going to care like an undefeated Ohio State or an Alabama if they go and play, like Vanderbilt beat Alabama last year.
Right.
If you see Vanderbilt beating Alabama and they're undefeated in week 8 or 9, you're going to be, I don't really care if they beat them. Like, oh yeah, that's crazy, but I don't really care.
Right. And Cody, I mean, do you think that dilutes the sport a little bit? I mean, do you think whenever we get up to 16 teams and a team like, I don't know, we could have seen another Big 12 team in, or maybe a lower tier ACC team. I mean, do you think that maybe dilutes it? You are getting more football, but you're kind of like,
I got to be honest with you. I think 12 teams is probably enough.
mm-hmm.
I think at the end of the day, they're wanting to expand it probably for money, because
Right.
more teams getting in means more money in their pockets. Because, I mean, if Arkansas is a 16 seed going into one of these one day, everybody's going to go nuts buying the tickets out of this state. So,
I mean, if they expanded it to 100 and Arkansas made it as 100, I would be happy
yeah,
with.
and knowing we would get smoked, we'd still go.
Right.
So,
Right.
I think a lot of it's about money. I like the 4-team format. However, I understand that some of these teams from other conferences will never really know what could have been. But like Alabama not getting in or whatever, it you have your chance. If you can't make a 12-team playoff, you probably shouldn't be in it. Chances are you're not going to make a deep run, in my opinion.
I mean, exactly. If you lose to Oklahoma that late in the season in the fashion that they lost to Oklahoma in, I don't want to hear an argument about like, oh, we should be in. It's like, all you have to do is win your games and you get in. You don't even have to win. You don't even have to go undefeated anymore. Like, so it makes it that much easier. Ohio State, and I keep referring to them because nobody knows, like, I'm a diehard Ohio State fan. But they also
go by your attire and your ball.
Yeah. But if like they're also relevant because they won the national championship last year, and they are the quote unquote like underdog. I think that's what they're selling a lot of people on too. Is like, oh, let's expand it. Like, we're going to get an underdog in. Like, I don't think your underdogs are going to be like the Boise State when they beat Oklahoma. Or like, SMU, unless they really throw in a bunch of money and they'll have one or two good years maybe, your underdogs are going to be your Alabamas, your Georgias, your Ohio States, the blue bloods that just kind of had a new starting quarterback or changed an offensive coordinator, and they're trying to get things figured out. And they might lose a game in the beginning of the season, or they might just crap the bed and lose their rivalry game. I hope it doesn't happen again this year. But, they might do that. But that's going to be your Cinderella stories.
Well, and by the time we saw Ohio State again, in between Michigan and Tennessee, you couldn't tell me those two teams were the same at all. It looked like a completely different team. And I think if you give like a Kirby Smart, a Ryan Day, a Steve Sarkisian, a coach like that, you give them motivation, you give them ample time to prepare. They're normally going to come out firing, and their team's going to be behind them completely. Also, I think I misspoke earlier. We are not covering the Big Ten this week. We are covering the ACC. I think I said the Big Ten. So,
it's a good conference. You're just excited.
Right. Yeah, I'm just so excited to watch Iowa and Minnesota play at 3:30.
No.
Cody, who did you start with on your little preview here?
So I'm going to start out by talking about Florida State.
Mm-hmm.
Last season we know that was a complete utter failure for them. They finished 2-10. I didn't even realize that Mike Norvell was hired back in December of 2019. I started looking back. I'm like, was there a coaching change? What happened? Because you just don't see that kind of thing. They're projected to do a little better. However, they're not projected to do that well. They're projected to finish 6-6 this season. They got a pretty tough schedule. I mean, they got to play Alabama, Clemson, Miami, Florida. That's probably 0 for 4 right there. Let me see. I always pick the hard name. So their quarterback, Thomas Castellanos or whatever, he transferred in from Boston College.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, his stats last year are pretty bad. I can't sugarcoat it. I'm like, I don't see this being that good of a season for him. Maybe. He had a 61 completion percentage. He passed for a little over 1,300 yards, 18 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. QBR on the season of 37.9, and he's supposed to be a dual threat quarterback, and he had better rushing yards in 2023, but last year at 93 carries, he ran for just under 200 yards. So I hate it for the Florida State fans, especially, what happened a couple years ago for them, get them all excited. I think this is going to be another disappointing year, and I think this coach is going to be on the hot seat very soon.
Do you think he survives a 6-6 season? Because they're 2 years removed from undefeated up into the bowl game, but they didn't play anyone in that. And then they didn't make the playoff and they felt slighted. And then the next year they go 2-10, and it's kind of a similar story with the transfer portal where they're using a microwave essentially to try to build this team. They're just trying to get hot quick. Do you think Mike Norvell, who has a lot of he's had success there, but he's also had 2-10. Do you think he survives another disappointing year at a place like Florida State?
I think if he survives this year by going 6-6 or another disappointing year, I think if he does it again, he definitely won't be there. Is my take on that.
Right. How many wins
even,
do you think he has to get to make it to 2026?
I think he needs at least 8.
All right. I agree.
I want to say now. I think he just signed a contract.
Extension?
Yeah, an extension. Yeah, I want to say he just signed one. Not this year. It might have been this year. It might have been last year. Because they jumped on it really quick. Kind of like Indiana did with Kirk Cignetti. It's like, why are you extending him just after that? I don't think he's gone, but I don't think he's got too much long. I think after this season, if he goes 6-6, I think he might have one more year, but he's got to do something crazy. I don't think he's gone after this season. And about the quarterback, I watched, I want to say, one or two of their games, and he was very lackluster, but you kind of seen it. You know what I mean? You kind of seen like he had a little something to him, and maybe the offensive coordinator didn't kind of like put him in great situations. I can't
Yeah.
say, obviously I don't really know who their offensive coordinator is, but it just
Gus
seemed like he
Malzahn.
do what?
Gus Malzahn.
Oh, they did hire Gus Malzahn. I do remember that now. Yeah, and with that quarterback, that could work out pretty well for that situation.
Yeah, I don't, like I said, I can't really put a finger on why I like him. But, and I'm not saying he's going to be any kind of Heisman Trophy winner or anything like that. But it just seems like he's got a kind of little dog to him, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, do y'all think 8 wins for a team like Florida State is a good year? I mean, coming off 2 wins, I mean, it is Florida State. They do have a lot of pressure, and they did go undefeated 2 years ago. I mean, would you consider 8 wins with a schedule that includes Clemson, Miami? I can't remember everyone you named. Alabama. I mean, do you think 8 wins is a good year for a team like that?
I think coming off a 2-10 season, it's certainly an improvement. Now,
Right.
he's probably going to have to maintain that and make a run into the playoffs the following season, or I think he's gone. But
Right.
he needs to show improvement, and a lot of it, or I don't think he survives after this year.
Okay, Justin, who did you start with on your first team?
Man, I started with Miami, and it's not that I don't like Miami. It's just they kind of, I don't know, that like last year almost felt like that Florida State season that we were talking about a little bit earlier, when it just seemed like it was a flash in the pan. You don't really know if Mario Cristobal is really it. Because, I mean, before last season, people were talking about Mario Cristobal being on the hot seat. And I think he was really good at Oregon, but I think he came into a good situation at Oregon. He's coming into Miami. I think he's been there for 3 or 4 years. He came into a situation with Miami where he came in right on the toes of NIL. So everybody kind of was in this new thing. And if you know college football, you know Miami's trying to throw absolute money at anybody that'll come that way.
Right.
So I think, like I said, I'm not sold on them, but I don't think they're going to be bad. They got Carson Beck. The thing is, the big question mark with that team and Carson Beck, are you getting Carson Beck from 2 years ago? Or are you getting Carson Beck from last year? Because those are two totally different people. He had a bad interception problem last year. And if you really look at the film and go through the analytics, he didn't just throw that many interceptions. He had a lot of balls that should have been intercepted that just weren't.
Right.
Now, I do really like their running back. I think he's really good. Fletcher. Yeah, Mark Fletcher. He was originally going to be committed to Ohio State, and Miami absolutely they spent an absurd amount of money, so much where he couldn't turn it down.
Right.
But I think he's good and he's showing progress. I think when a running back stays at a program for 3 years like that, I think it shows like he really sees the trust. He likes the offensive line, especially Mario Cristobal. Coming from, he's an offensive line coach. So he's going to set up your offensive line to make it to where there's one thing about offensive line head coaches. They're going to dominate the trenches.
Our offensive lines have been terrible, and our head coach is an offensive line coach.
Like I said, a lot of that depends on recruiting. Miami just paid a freshman offensive tackle, never started a single game, $2 million.
2.5 for 2 years.
2.5. That's more money than the 33rd overall pick in the NFL draft last year is going to make in a season. Think about that. That's what college football is now. Like I said, they did. Obviously, they lost Cam Ward. I don't think that's a replaceable player at all. If you didn't have Travis Hunter last year, Cam Ward's winning it. You know what I mean? He was a number 1 overall draft pick, and he just had, had crazy arm talent.
He just had a moxie about him,
he just
confidence.
I've never seen somebody jog for 20 yards or stand flat-footed in the pocket and just whip 20 yards down the field. He was an absolute video game.
Mm-hmm.
I never even watched Miami till last year, to be honest with you.
Yeah. He was must-see TV, man.
I mean, I think everybody did. And at the end of the day, you had little kids on the playground doing this right here. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? And
I do it. I do it to my monitor whenever I score on the video game. I mean, come on.
exactly. And I mean, I like Cody said. I mean, was Miami on anybody's roster before the end of the season or before the beginning of the season? I'm sorry.
No, not really. I mean,
I mean, a little bit. Like if
a
you
little
really
bit,
go,
but not
yeah, if
really.
you really delve deep into college football, they were. But you had to keep up with the whole country because Cam Ward came from Washington State. It
Yeah.
wasn't like you know what I mean? Their schedule, I wouldn't say that it's hard, but I wouldn't say that it's easy. So they start off with Notre Dame. You know, those are two teams that they're blue bloods, but they still have a lot to prove. I don't think Notre Dame was happy with the way they ended the season, even though they made it to the national championship. The way that national championship game played out, I just don't feel like they were happy. They really felt like they were going to come back and beat Ohio State. I mean, I was nervous there for a while, and they just couldn't get it. They just couldn't get it together. They just couldn't, finish it off. So I feel like they have a lot to prove. I feel like that's going to be a really good game. It's a home game. I mean, Miami plays at Hard Rock Stadium, so it's not like it's a traditional quote unquote home game, but it's a home game for Miami. Then they have Florida at home. Florida's a big game, especially with DJ Lagway playing the way that he was last year. I mean, I know he battled some injuries, but if you really got to watch him, he was kind of like that Cam Ward-esque. Just a younger guy, but he had that, just like you said, that moxie about him, the NFL arm, the make the throw all over the field. So
And
those are the
Florida's going to
two.
be motivated in that game because they got their butts whooped
Yeah.
week one last year at home. So, I mean, Florida's going to be pissed going into that game.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, I mean, other than that, man, I don't really see a game on their schedule that I'm just like, oh, they're really going to have to strap down and pay attention. I mean, obviously it's college football. They're going to have to do what they can to win every single game. But there's not a game on that schedule that I'm just like, dang, they're probably going to lose that game.
Are they dodging Clemson on their
Yeah,
schedule?
they're dodging Clemson. I mean, that's what I'm saying. They play Notre Dame, and then they play South Florida, and then their conference schedule is Stanford, SMU. I'm high on SMU, though. But I don't think that Miami, that's going to be a toss-up game. I'm not comfortable saying that Miami's definitely going to lose that game.
Right. Well, talent-wise, Miami should blow the doors off of them if we're just going off money.
I mean, yeah, should. Now, like we talked about earlier, SMU made the college football playoffs last year.
Right.
They got bounced first round, but that was big, especially, and I'll talk about it in a little bit. If you know college football, there's one team that all the Blue Bloods are worried about, and that's SMU because they got the money to back up a roster.
Pony Express, they've been doing it since the 80s.
Exactly. I mean, there's definite money there. But other than that, man, I mean, they should have inferior talent to everybody that they play, besides Notre Dame, Florida. And other than that, that's really it.
I think a big thing for them on the Carson Beck thing is the last thing we seen from Carson Beck was his shoulder hanging down, his throwing shoulder at that. He couldn't move it, and he had to hand the ball off with one hand. He had UCL surgery. That's Tommy John surgery. So I think a big thing for them is week one they play Notre Dame, who's returning Jeremiah. What was his name? Jeremiah Love. He might be the best running back in America outside of the two guys Penn State has. Can Carson Beck, is he healthy enough to win that, to even play, let alone win a game against a team that is the runner-up to the national champions? I think that'll be a big thing looking forward a little bit, but as we go into the summer through, June, July, August, kind of keep an eye on that because that might say a lot about how good Miami could be early on in the season where the bulk of their mishaps could be in their schedule,
Yeah, and they have a bunch of – that's the thing about Miami. They really don't have time to work out kinks if Carson Beck isn't, the 2023 Carson Beck. They don't have time. They play Notre Dame, and then I think they have 3 weeks, and then they play Florida. Right. I mean, and we were talking about it earlier. If you lose 2 games – now, granted, that's out-of-conference games, but if you lose 2 games, I mean, with their schedule and their strength of schedule that they have, are they going to be in at 10-2. I mean, they weren't in at 10-2 last year.
Well, and like you've seen with a team like Clemson last year, who lost a couple of non-conference games, they had to win it to make it the playoffs. So
Yeah.
I don't think Miami's going to be there to play in that conference championship game. I don't think playoffs should even be on their radar. So, kind of, what do you have them going this year? What do you expect from them? What's like your record?
Man, I think they're definitely losing to Notre Dame. I just don't see them winning that game. I think they're losing to Florida. We talked about Florida State or Florida State a little bit earlier. Cody did. I think they could drop Florida State too. Honestly, I mean, even though it's a toss-up game. That's the thing about Miami. They have a lot of toss-up games. I mean, I see them at least losing 4 to 5 games.
8-4, 7-5.
8-4, 7-5, somewhere around there. And I think, I mean, I know it was 1 year, but I think if they don't win more than 8 games, I think Mario could be not on the hot seat, but he's definitely going to feel it warming up.
Right. Cody, do you have anything on Miami that maybe you'd like to say? I don't really have anything else. Covered it pretty well, I feel like.
I think one of the biggest things that I hope they addressed was their defense.
Mm-hmm.
Their defense was atrocious. It was nothing but high scoring, which, don't get me wrong, that's awesome to see. I think there's a bad echo.
Yeah, I think we are echoing again. We'll just have to edit this. Let me see. Oh, well, okay. We have echo cancellation on, so it should cancel that, I think. Sorry about that. I'll edit this. It's no big deal. We're at like the 26-second mark. Okay. So you were talking about their defense.
Yeah, so Miami's defense was atrocious. Now, luckily, a lot of the defenses in their conference last year were. And we got these awesome high scoring coming down to the last couple minutes of the game, which was really fun to watch. But, even if they would have made the playoffs, and I think they should have, I don't think they would have made a deep run in it.
Right.
Because their defense just, I don't think, would have been able to handle a Notre Dame or handle Ohio State or, some of these other teams that were well-rounded all the way.
Well, and you kind of saw it in their regular season schedule last year. I mean, they got taken to the brink by Cal. They lost that game to Syracuse at the end, where they just couldn't stop Kyle McCord. So I think you're right. And with the uncertainties that they have on the offensive side of the ball, I don't think that bodes well for them. Even though they have spent a lot of money and they're supposed to be a lot better defensively, but you really don't know until you get into it.
I think they brought in some transfers on the defensive end, especially in the back end. I mean, they brought in. There's 4 transfers on the defensive side that are projected to start. Like I said, we're coming out of spring. I mean, the summer could change all this, but projected to start. They have 4 transfers, and they're all at safety and corner. Free safety, strong safety, nickel corner, and field side corner. So, I mean, are those guys going to be able to mesh? Because on the defensive side of the ball, that's like your bread and butter. You have to be able to stop the pass. Now, you have to be able to stop the run. But those guys back there communicate a lot more. Defensive linemen are talking about passing this guy off and picking this guy up and covering this portion of the field. Like a lot of the safeties and corners, that's what they have to talk about mid-play. So are they going to be able to communicate and know the defense like they need to know it like the back of their hand?
Right. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to watch. I mean, I don't think by any means Notre Dame's going to throw the ball on them 100 times, but but whenever they get into the more passing heavy teams, we'll see how that transfer secondary holds up. To a team that's got a lot of returning things, I went over Clemson. They're returning their D-line. They got the defensive coordinator from Penn State, Tom Allen, and more importantly than anything, they got Cade Klubnik, who outside of Penn State's quarterback, those two are the most experienced, most proven guys that are returning to college football this year. Last year, he went for 3,600 yards with a 36-6 touchdown to interception ratio. He really came on at the end of the year, gave them a shot to win that Texas game. And if you just watch them week one versus Georgia, and then you watch them like in that conference championship game against SMU, they were a completely different team, and a lot of that was due to Cade Klubnik. Um, Obviously, Dabo went into the portal a lot better this year, or not a lot better. He didn't go into it deep. He got three guys, but those three guys are Jeremiah Alexander, a linebacker from Alabama, Will Helt, an edge from I think it was Wake Forest, but they're really excited about him. And Tristan Smith, he's like a 6'5", 210-pound wide receiver that they're real excited about. So I expect their receiving room to be a lot better. I expect their defense to get better too. They ranked somewhere like 60th on defense last year, and bringing in a guy like Tom Allen from Penn State who had a top 10 defense last year. So I think that'll help boost up Clemson. And with the returning quarterback, there's no reason this team shouldn't win the ACC. I, they'll probably have some close games in conference, but really they should blow the doors off most teams they play. They do have some pretty good teams on their schedule. Week one, they're hosting LSU, as we've talked about before. Um, More than anything, I hope they beat the dog crap out of LSU. Brian Kelly with yeah, Brian Kelly with his whole Greg Brooks situation where he's not hasn't talked to the guy in 18 months and he's got cancer and all that stuff. But not only that, Garrett Nussmeier is a super inconsistent guy. He's either up here or he's down here, and it can flip in a quarter. And I just think Clemson's more talented. LSU did bring in the number one transfer portal class, but week one you're going to a place in Clemson where it's gonna be a beehive, and you're playing an experienced team that isn't reliant on this microwave option of bringing in the number one transfer portal class. They got returning guys, they're their guys, and I really expect it to not go LSU's way at all. Week 9 they host Florida State. That's a rivalry game. It's kind of a newer rivalry game as Clemson and Florida State kind of were on their rise at a similar time, late 2010s into like 2015. Um, they go to Louisville on a Friday night, so that'll be the only game on TV probably that's worth watching. Jeff Brom in Louisville. Again, Clemson's the standard of the ACC, so everything's going to be geared toward this Week 10 game for Louisville. So that could be a trap set up in a sense. They play North Carolina. They go to North Carolina. Who knows how good they'll be. But for the most part, it's a very workable schedule. But at the end, they got South Carolina. Lenora Sellers I think he's a great quarterback. He could be a dark horse to win the Heisman. It's in Columbia, and Williams-Brice is notorious for being crazy, and especially against Clemson, who they hate probably more than they hate the devil. So they do have some potential slip ups, but this isn't a schedule that scares me if I'm Clemson necessarily. But you can still build a resume to where you could be one of those bye week teams. You don't have to go to Texas on the first week of the playoff.
What week do they play Georgia Tech?
I'm gonna look that up super quick. It is. I think it's like middle of the year. I think it's in October.
Is it a home game or an away?
It's September. It's week 3 at Georgia Tech. It's in Atlanta, so that could also be that could be a tough one for them too. Really, I expect Georgia Tech to be a lot better.
I do too. I mean, their defense was extremely good last year. I think they exceeded expectations for sure. But I just, man, like you were saying, I don't think anybody's touching Clemson in the ACC. I just don't. And I know you said like Dabo only brought in 3 transfer portal guys. Hey, that's big steps for Dabo Swinney. I thought he was going to try to crucify the transfer portal. I didn't think he was ever going to bring anybody in, maybe a water boy. But other than that, I never thought he was going to bring any players in. I'm kind of with you. I don't think anybody's going to touch Clemson except for maybe South Carolina at the end of the year, which is scary for the playoffs because at the end of the year, Like, if you lose one game, they're still making it to the playoffs, but that's going to reset their team. You know what I mean? If they
Right.
lose, that's going to give them, like, okay, we're not untouchable. We need to get back to work like we used to be in week 1 through 5.
Well, and if I had to pick a team as my favorite right now that we've just went over in general, or just if I was looking at the whole college football landscape, who do I trust? I trust Clemson this year.
Yeah.
They're hungry. They want to get back to where they were, and I think Dabo's got a lot to prove still because he hasn't done anything since NIL. Post COVID, I mean, they've just been okay. So I think this is a big year for Clemson, and I would not be surprised to see them playing in late January. Um, Cody, you got anything about Clemson?
I love Dabo. I think he's a great coach. I expect big things out of him. Like I said, I think they're going to go into. They're not going anywhere. I think LSU is going to go into their stadium and get beat, and I think I'm going to enjoy watching that. I hate Brian Kelly.
I think I am too. Cody, who was your second team that you went and looked at?
Georgia Tech. You know, I believe in episode 1 I spoke on them a little bit because I was talking about the Colorado Georgia Tech game week 1. I still like Georgia Tech in that game. Um, last year they finished 7-6, 5-3 in conference play. Haynes King, we talked about him before. He passed for 2,100 yards, had a 73% completion percentage, along with 14 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. And he also rushed for about 580 yards on 125 attempts. So that's about 4.7 yards a carry. Those stats right there, they're going to help you. They're going to win you games. I would rely on him in short yardage situation to get me that first down. I really like Georgia Tech this year in this conference. I know I do have Clemson beating them, but I would not be surprised if Georgia Tech can pull off this upset. So they're actually projected to finish 9-3. I'm going to assume that they're, obviously they're giving them a loss in the bowl game because they only play 11 regular season games or something. But when I went through their schedule, I got them finishing 9-2 in the regular season with their only 2 losses coming to Clemson and Georgia.
Okay.
But I would not be surprised to see them do better than that. Take one of those games that I think they're going to lose. It wouldn't shock me at all. Um, I'm the more I research Georgia Tech, the more I'm liking them. Honestly, every time I research them, I'm like, man, I might have to cop me a jersey or something. I think I like them this year. I think they're going to do well. I think they're going to be one of the front runners of this conference.
And as we kind of talked about last time we talked about Georgia Tech, they are returning Haynes King, who he's not electric by any means in the pocket. He's just serviceable, but on the ground, he really adds to that run game a lot. And I think that could be big for them moving forward to surprise a lot of teams with their good defense and their good run game. If a team like Clemson or like Georgia is not maybe taking them as seriously, we could see them make it an ugly slugfest and really win that game maybe. Justin, you got anything on Georgia Tech?
Yeah, man, I'm going to be honest. I really like Georgia Tech, too. I mean, obviously, it's kind of one of those teams that you didn't talk about them last year either until it was time to talk about them. I mean, they took Georgia to, what was it, 9 overtimes or something? I mean, they took them to
Something crazy.
something crazy. And the thing is about Georgia Tech is, like you said, they're returning Haynes King. Haynes King, he's not going to shock you. If you watch his highlights, you're going to think that he's some, you're just going to not think that he's just a top of the echelon college quarterback because at the end of the day, he's a great kid and he's a great football player. He's not. But he's just got something about him where the kid just wants to win. I mean, you've seen him in the Georgia game. It showed him, it looked like he was about to die. He reminds me a lot, just play type, and I know it's a movie. He reminds me a lot of the quarterback from Friday Night Lights. He's got blood on his jersey. He
Yeah.
just won't stop. That's what Hank Keems remind me of, and that's what type of mentality Georgia Tech is as a team. And I just think that marriage between a quarterback and that team with that defense, I'm kind of with y'all. I think they could really sneak up and cause some problems for Georgia. You're going to have to prepare for them. It's not like 3 years ago when Georgia Tech was just getting mollywopped by Georgia, 45-20 or something like that. They're going to have to pay attention. They're going to have to prepare. And Georgia Tech runs a style of offense that you don't get to prepare for it week in and week out. They don't run a spread. They have their own identity as an offense, and they're going to run it down your throat over and over and over until you make them pass it. And when they pass it, Haynes King is good enough to make you pay.
Right. So you said like 9-3 or 9-3, 8-4 in that range, kind of 10 wins maybe if there's kind of their ceiling.
Yeah, I think 10 wins is the ceiling. I got them finishing at 9-2.
Right on, right on, right on. I like that for them. That would mean a lot for that program in general. They've kind of 2010 to 2020. They had maybe one good year, I think, but they were still running the triple option then. So since they went to the spread, or they're running the ball still a bunch, but they're more, they're not running in a wing T or a dead eye or nothing. They haven't had any success really until last year. So I do think it would be good for that program to maybe revitalize it, because it is a program in Atlanta that could, if everything was going right, could be one of maybe the big dogs. I mean, they're right there in the South where they have bukus of talent all around them. So maybe we'll keep seeing them progress and take the next step as a program. Justin, who did you take for your second team?
Man, it's kind of one of those things to where I think I'm going to get a lot of hate for it just because it's like they're coming off of a season that nobody expected them to have. But
Mm-hmm.
I took SMU. I like their returning quarterback. I mean, he's a great player. Kevin Jennings, he's been there. He's a redshirt junior. I think he transferred in. No, he's straight out of high school, goes to SMU. He's from the Texas area, so, it's kind of like playing at home. Last year he threw for over 3,000 yards, had a 65% completion rate. Yeah, 65. He had a little bit of an interception problem, and I'm not going to lie to you, I didn't sit down and watch all their games. Every interception isn't the same. So
Right.
I'm really high on him. I think the thing about SMU is they have the potential to scare the Blue Bloods, because there's so much money in that area. If those boosters get a little bit of a taste of success, I feel like it could just go absolutely nuclear with that team. Now, you never know if they're going to be able to change it out, because not every team can make the transfer portal work for them. I mean, we've seen, Florida State do it last year. They just couldn't make it work. But I think SMU is a team that if they can get everything clicked and they can bring in the right guys, I think maybe not this coming up year, but I think in years to come, they could really get the ball rolling to where we are talking about them as being they're going to make it to the college football playoff every single year. Now on defense, I mean, I wouldn't say that they're great on defense, but in the ACC, do you really have to be great on defense? Obviously, it's going to hurt you in the college football playoffs if you don't have a good defense. But just to make it to the college football playoffs, do you have to have that top 5, top 10, top 20 style defense? I just don't think they're going to have it, because their schedule, I don't see anybody. They play Clemson at Clemson. That's how we talked about that a little bit earlier. They play TCU, which I haven't really dove too deep into TCU, so I can't sit here and tell you, what they're going to be. I don't think they're ever going to come back to the year when they had Max Duggan. I don't think that's ever going to be a TCU thing again. I don't see it happening again. So I don't really fear TCU with them. They do play Miami, which a lot of Miami's success depends on Carson Beck. So you don't really know what Miami's going to be. That's the whole thing about the ACC that we were kind of talking about. It's really wide open besides Clemson. You have a lot of those middle tier teams that are relying on 1 to 2 players to play like they should. But you never know if they're going to play like they should, and that's why we all love college football. They do play Louisville at the end of the season. That's going to be a big game. It's at home, luckily, which they kind of got lucky because they have Miami at home and Louisville at home. They play Clemson on the road. Um, TCU, I mean, like I said, they don't really have that tough of a schedule. The only team that I would say that nobody is really, I wouldn't say nobody's talking about them. Everybody talks about, this team just because of what they did last year. And, they had Kyle McCord. Syracuse. I don't really know what Syracuse could be, but I will tell you one thing. Fran Brown is probably one of my top 3 coaches in all of college football just because of how he is. So right now, I mean, I have SMU losing 3 games, and I don't feel comfortable saying that either. I could see them only losing 1. I mean, it really depends on how they come out on defense. They took some transfers, but like I said, they didn't have some overwhelming, just take the whole defense and restructure everything. I like their head coach a lot. I really do. I think he's a good head coach. I think he's on the up and coming too. I don't think that I don't think he's somebody that's going to possibly leave, but I do think he's well enough, kind of like a Kirk Cignetti or somebody like that, that you're going to have to talk about SMU and their coaching staff next year because that's how well coached they are.
I think that's pretty good. What'd you say you think the record might be?
I think they're definitely losing to Clemson, so that's 1. And I think Louisville could sneak them. I just don't have enough trust in Miami to beat them. So I'm saying they're, 10-2?
Yeah, that'd be back-to-back 10-win years for SMU.
I mean that's huge. Like I said, they have a lot of returning production. It's nothing overly, like, there's not one person on the defense that I'm just like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to be a game changer. They did bring in 3 transfers, and they're all within the box. When I say within the box, that means defensive line or, linebackers or something like that. And on the offensive side of the ball, they did bring in a right guard and a center, so that's going to have to play out, and we're going to have to see how that works. But most of the time, offensive linemen, if they get it figured out in that top 5, they really mesh together pretty well.
Well, I mean, I think SMU is an interesting just team to look at because of where they are in Dallas, and they could have the money. So a back-to-back 10-win years for them could mean a lot going forward, to maybe take that step as a power in the conference. Because right now it's kind of Clemson and everyone else. I mean,
Yeah.
Miami last year, and who knows how good they're going to be this year. And just in general, kind of Florida State's a measuring stick in a sense for the ACC. But I like that for SMU. Cody, you got anything you want to say about SMU? Fair enough. Fair enough. The last team I went over, or the second team I went over, was Louisville. Jeff Brom, I like Jeff Brom a lot. He impresses me every year. Every year, I think Louisville's going to be worse than they actually wind up being. And he got a transfer in Miller Moss at quarterback that I personally wasn't that impressed with at USC. And if you can't impress me under Lincoln Riley, I don't have a lot of faith in him. But like I said, I'm always low on Louisville. And who knows, Miller Moss might wind up being a stud. Last year, he went for 2,500 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 9 picks. So, I mean, he was by no means a typical Lincoln Riley quarterback or that we've seen over the last 10 years, basically. But good news for Louisville. They do run the ball a lot. They got a running back in Isaac Brown that broke Lamar's rushing record, which, yes, Lamar was a quarterback, but I mean, if you watched Louisville with Lamar, they utilized Lamar's running ability a lot, and then they also have another real explosive guy in Duke Watson. They've brought in a couple more guys in the running back room, but that's kind of the 1-2 punch to what I expect. They had a receiver last year that caught like 40 balls, 700 yards, a couple touchdowns. Not going to blow your socks off stats-wise, but with Miller Moss, maybe maybe that receiving room takes a step up. I didn't watch a whole lot of Louisville football last year, and the games I did watch, their offense was atrocious. So the fact that they had a guy have 700 receiving yards is kind of impressive to me because I did not think that they threw the ball at all really well at all last year. And their defense, they lost a lot in the offseason as far as interior D-line. Their linebackers weren't super good, so even if they did retain linebackers last year, I don't know. But they kept some of their secondary. They did keep some of their linebackers. They kept an edge guy or two. And they got a transfer that they're real excited about from Florida International. His name is JoJo Evans. He's a safety. Jeff Brom's a defensive guy, so I figure their defense won't be the issue if they have kind of a disappointing season. They don't play Notre Dame this year like they did last year, so the non-con's a lot more workable. They do have 3, I would say, tough games for who I qualify, or 3 or 4, depends. If you count Kentucky, I don't think Kentucky will be that great this year, but it is a in-state rivalry game, so you really don't know what you're going to get. That could be a game that slips them up. But week 6, they go to Miami. Like we've talked about over and over again with Miami, we don't know yet money that they've spent. If it was all just about how much money you spend, they're a top 10 team in the country. Depending on how that pans out, we'll see how good Miami really is. Week 10, they host Clemson Friday, like I talked about earlier, Friday night game. Their whole season is going to be geared around that game, I feel like. So that could be just a bee's hive for Clemson. And then they go to SMU in week 11. Those are all 3 winnable games to me for Louisville. Not winnable in a sense of like talent-wise. I don't think they're good enough to beat Clemson. Just the situation around it. You've seen crazier things in college football. But as far as just as far as how their season goes, I could see them winning those 3 games. But I could also see them losing to Pitt in week 3 or week 4. I could see them going on the road in November and losing to Virginia Tech. So, to me, this is a team that could win 9 games. That's kind of their ceiling to me is 9. But their floor to me is like 5-6 wins. I really hope, for Jeff Brom's sake, I don't think he'll be fired with a 6-win year, but just for momentum, and I feel like Louisville is always a fun team to watch if you do catch an ACC game. So I really hope that they're better than I'm maybe expecting. I could see them. I'll go in the middle and say 7 wins. Maybe sneak up on one of those teams, Miami, SMU. I don't think SMU's necessarily better than them. I think SMU has less questions, mainly because of their quarterback. So hopefully I'm wrong about Miller Moss, and hopefully they have a pretty good year is what I'm hoping. Cody, do you have anything to say about Louisville? If you don't, that's okay. I can edit that question out. What do you got, Theme?
Man, I'm kind of with you. Like, if you're a quarterback under Lincoln Riley and you don't put up stats, then I don't know about you. But if I want to play devil's advocate with you, I could also be like, maybe Miller Moss just didn't pick it up as fast. Maybe he got gun-shy to being a starter. And, I mean, he's coming off the likes of, when you hear Lincoln Riley and insert any quarterback's name, the automatic thing you think of is, could be a Heisman Trophy winner, Caleb Williams,
Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray.
Exactly.
Spencer Rattler was pretty good at Oklahoma and then was real good at South Carolina too. So
Exactly. So those are the names that you're mentioning somebody in. I will say, Miller Moss, I watched a lot of his games last year just because they were exciting. His receiver play that surrounded him wasn't great, but it wasn't like he was trying to set them up for success either. But I will say, he is an Elite 11 quarterback. He has the arm talent. I mean, you watched some of his games last year, and you could see the way he threw the ball was NFL-esque. He could very well be an NFL quarterback. It's just, does he have it in between the ears to make those throws and be confident in himself? That's what it's really going to come down to with Louisville. is can Miller Moss be what they need him to be a field general, kind of just have that moxie about him. We talk about it all the time, but when you talk about college football quarterbacks, that's what it really determines. I mean, you have to have the moxie about you. And I think Miller Moss has the arm talent, but I don't know if he has it in between the ears. And I think that's what's really going to determine how good Louisville is this year.
I can agree. I think if he has a bad year, then it'll be a bad season. If he exceeds the expectations, this could be a sleeper playoff team for the ACC. Um, so obviously, we got to talk about North Carolina and a lot of their off the field, in the
Girlfriend
facility,
issues.
in the bedroom, whatever issues that could be. Cody, I will kind of let you take the lead on this one.
Yeah, so it's no surprise really. Everybody knows Bill Belichick has a 27-year-old girlfriend, and that's fine. She's of age to consent to whatever, and whatever. They're all adults. That doesn't bother me. Now, here's what does bother me. I'm not necessarily against your spouse or whatever kind of hanging around the program and stuff. But when she starts, or any of them, start causing certain issues and bringing all this negative attention to your program, there's already a question: is Bill Belichick got what it takes to be a college football coach? What he's done in the NFL, there's no doubt. Yes, he's cemented. He's on the Mount Rushmore. Nobody's questioning that. But one of the questions that we all have is, can he get it done on the college level? We've seen great college coaches go to the NFL and not be worth crap. It's not very often that we see a great NFL coach come down to the college level. So, this is something we haven't seen before. And I'm interested to see, he's been a GM for all these years as he was head coaching. I think the transfer portal, he stated he's probably got over 30 transfers coming in. I'm excited to see what North Carolina is. I think everybody is. I think as long as he doesn't lose the locker room, they're in for a good season. But I think we're kind of playing with fire here. I mean, I saw a report earlier this week that I sent y'all. Um, some people don't even know if he's going to make it to coach the first game of this season, because apparently the relationship between Belichick and the athletic director is pretty strained. So I'm just excited to see how this shakes out. I hope, for the sake of college football, he definitely coaches, because I think football is better with him in it, and I want to see what he can do on the college level.
Justin, you got anything to say about the Tar Heels?
Yeah, man. Obviously, I really think, obviously 2 or 3 years ago, who'd they have? They had who was their head coach? He'd been there forever. Mac Brown, was it Mac Brown? Yeah, so people kind of talked about him. He had quarterbacks coming in. They didn't really ever have just a great team, but they had a decent enough team where they were relevant around the college football landscape. And then for 2 or 3 years, they kind of died off. Nobody talked about him. And then as soon as Bill Belichick went, everything went crazy. My whole discussion about North Carolina is going to be based on him coaching this year. I don't know if he's going to or not. I know the whole girlfriend thing is something that I would have never thought Bill Belichick in college football would be like, the West Coast housewives of North Carolina. I would have never thought it would be like that, but it is. That's where we're at. So I'm just going to act like he's going to coach. I really like their quarterback. He's come from South Alabama, which certain SEC schools will know, because South Alabama plays a few SEC schools, or they did last year. It's Gio Lopez. He was a pretty good quarterback last year. Like I said, I mean, he's come from a lower tier football program, so you never know how that's really going to translate. He threw for 2,500 yards last year, 66% completion percentage, 18 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. So it wasn't really like he had an interception problem. He's a little bit of a dual threat. He became more of a dual threat last year, but I wouldn't say that he's, a Lamar Jackson type. He's a definitely throw first, run second, but he does have the ability. He ran for 463 yards last year on 83 attempts. Now, that all depends on, how your offense is setting you up. That's a lot of, run attempts for a quarterback. Now, I didn't watch too many of their games, so I don't know if that was scramble drill. I don't really know what that was. But here's what I will say. They got this kid out of the transfer portal. He's a redshirt sophomore, so this is his third season in college. When you say Bill Belichick, what's the first name that comes to mind? Tom Brady. He knows quarterbacks. He might not have been the one coaching Tom Brady, in there every day. He wasn't his quarterback's coach. But he knows what to look for in fundamentals, what's in between the ears, and how people break down film. And just sitting down and talking to somebody, especially the quarterback, you can find out a lot about him just sitting into a quote-unquote interview process. I think he's really good. Like Cody said, they brought in a lot of transfers. So you don't really know what they could be. But like we said the whole show, the ACC is wide open besides Clemson.
Yeah, there'll definitely be a lot of spots to fill behind Clemson, which I think Clemson might win the whole thing. But talking about North Carolina, they do host TCU in September. That could be I think they'll beat TCU. They go on the road to UCF, who has a new head coach. They host Clemson October 4th. That'll be a tough game. They go on the road to California, which even though Cal might not be a great team, I don't know. I haven't really looked into Cal a whole lot, but that's still a cross-country road trip in the middle of your season. And then after that, they go on the road to NC State, who is generally a better football program than them. So they do have some games on there that could trip them up. But we'll really just have to see how Bill Belichick translates and if he can figure this whole girlfriend thing out, man. I mean, if this is a distraction all the way into October, I don't see Bill Belichick being here next year with his age and just you can't have this many problems. But if he can figure that out, Bill Belichick can probably coach there until he's ready to go sit in a nursing home. But that's
He's
all I
not
got.
too far away.
Right? No, he's not.
Just to talk about their schedule, the one game that really does kind of stick out to me, obviously Clemson. We've been high on Clemson all show. It seems like everybody's high on Clemson this year, which is understandable.
Right.
The game that really sticks out to me is Cal, and that's because that's a long trip. And I want to say last year, and like I said, don't quote me on this, but especially with the new conferences coming in, there was a lot of cross-country travels that a lot of teams were having to do. And I want to say the teams that traveled across time zones like that were something like they had a significant losing record against who they were going to play. It didn't matter if they were coming from West Coast to East Coast to West Coast, and that's a long ways to travel. And Cal brought in a quarterback. Know a little bit about him. He was the backup quarterback for Ohio State for a while. He didn't really ever turn out to be anything, but that's another kid that just, he was around the program that I keep up with on a day-to-day basis. He has heart to him. He cares about football, and he's kind of that dual threat. He was a 4-star athlete, which is big for Cal to get.
And I just don't think you can ever count out a cross-country trip and say that's an easy win. So it could be a rough year for Bill Belichick, or who knows? I mean, he's kind of the football guru. He's kind of a wizard. So if you can do it on that level, you can kind of maybe hopefully do it anywhere. But before we wrap up, is there anything you want to go over, Cody? Feel like we covered everything pretty well. What about you, Beam?
Yeah, man. I mean, like I said, I don't have any notes on him or on them. I don't think any of us do. But I think it would be a disservice to Syracuse and the Fran Brown if we don't talk about Fran Brown a little bit. I just think he's that next up-and-coming coach where he's going to be at Syracuse for a little bit, and then you're going to hear of a nationwide shock when a Jordan, I'm just naming off blue blood program.
Arkansas.
Listen, if Arkansas gets Fran Brown, it's going to be hard for me not to root for him a little bit more than I already do. But, I mean, he could go somewhere like an Alabama if they don't figure, I don't think their coach was really bad, but, Alabama, you're following up the greatest coach of all time. I'm not saying Fran Brown's leaving by no means. I'm just saying he's on that level Um, he's about 2 or 3 steps behind some of these programs, but he's on that level of the Ryan Days, of the Kirby Smarts, of the. I think he's gonna be there in the next 3 to 4 years.
Right. Well, I mean, I hope you're right. I mean, I enjoyed watching Syracuse last year, but I think it was because I did love Kyle McCord and the way he would just throw it 80 yards down the field every time he touched the ball.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so maybe they will be a surprise. We'll probably go deeper into the ACC and the Big 12 again whenever we get closer to the season. But I'd say for a preview, we hit it pretty good today, boys. So thank you all for listening to Three Deep South. Join us next week. We'll be talking about the Big Ten next week. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify. I just made a Twitter account today. It's all 3D South. TikTok as well. I don't want to forget that. And I hope y'all have a good night, good day. If y'all have any questions, any of our listeners, send them in. We would love to answer them. And thank y'all very much.